Hello, my name is Euro and welcome to another Baldur's Gate 3 build video. In today's video, I'll be showing you my take on the Eldritch Blaster build. So this build will be just like 2 levels of Warlock, so we can get our Devil's Sight and Agonizing Blast, and of course get our Eldritch Blast. And then the rest, we will go for the Sorcerer, so we can get a lot of Sorcerer spell slots, and we can also then convert those into the Mastery points, spell slot Mastery points, so we can, or Meta Magic, it's called, not Mastery. So that we can basically beef up all of our spells, primarily Eldritch Blasts. So let's get into the character creation. So for the race, you can pretty much go with anything. This build isn't really race dependent. It is a very overpowered build, so it will work pretty much with anything. I went with a Tiefling. Tieflings get Hellish Resistance, which gives them resistance to fire damage. They have Dark Vision, normal speed. And then for the subrace, I went with the Osmosis Tiefling, as they at later levels gain 1 free cast of Darkness, which is quite nice since we'll have Devil's Sight and we can fight from within it. While enemies that don't have it will, of course, not really be able to effectively fight us. For first cantrip, we do get Produce Flame. This is an okay cantrip. For the longest time, I thought it would it costed 2 actions to actually use in combat, but it's actually 1 action, although it's only 1d8 fire damage and only 30 range feet, so it's quite short range. But anyway, for our class, we're going, of course, as a Warlock. For the cantrips, you're going with the good old Eldritch Blast, 1d10 force damage, and then every time you gain a proficiency bonus, or when you level up basically at level 5 and level 10, it adds an additional 1d10 force beam to it, which is quite powerful, especially with some of the equipment and the Agonizing Blast Warlock feature. For the second cantrip, we're going with Friends. Friends is a great out-of-combat cantrip, which gives you advantage on charisma checks against non-hostile creatures. You just have to be careful if you're on hard difficulties that you leave the area before you stop concentrating on it, or if it runs out, because they will accuse you of enchanting them, and then you'll have trouble with the law. For the other cantrips, in this case, we don't really need any of them. We are set with combat and out-of-combat cantrips, so these are probably the best 2 choices right there. For the subclass, we're going with the Great Old One. Reason is the subclass feature of Mortal Reminder. When you land a critical hit against a creature, that creature and nearby enemies must succeed a Wisdom saving throw or become frightened until the end of their next turn. So this is a great crowd control effect that will be very useful later on once we have an even higher chance of getting a critical hit. But when it does proc, normally it's still great to have this, since of course frightened targets have disadvantage on attack rolls and ability checks. For the spells, I'm going with the Armor of Agathis. Armor of Agathis is great as a spell you cast at the beginning of every long rest. I usually also then leave 1 or 2 high level spell slots so I can keep casting it during the long rest if I need to, if I take damage during combat. This gives you temporary hit points, and then you deal the damage amount for the temporary hit points you originally started with. So if you cast this as a level 5 spell, you will get 25 temporary hit points and you will deal 25 cold damage. And then if you have 5 temporary hit points left and you get hit, you will still deal 25 cold damage, so it's quite good. Then for the second one, we're going with Hex. So this makes your attacks deal additional 1d6 necrotic damage, gives them disadvantage in ability checks of your choosing. If the target dies before the spell ends, you can hex a new creature without spending a spell slot. So this is a decent damage increase for enemies with higher amounts of HP. Later in the game, you won't really have a chance to cast it, as you'll be basically killing everything before you even get to get the benefits of Hex. One thing I noticed that I think this works greatly with is if you hex their dexterity, enemy dexterity, and if you have a high strength character, throw them, basically pick up the enemy and throw them. Basically what happens when you pick someone up and throw them, they end up being prone, so you can give or they can give themselves or their other melee allies advantage against them, and Hex should, I believe, give you a benefit from that, since it gives them advantage. Then for the ability scores, we're going 14 dexterity, 16 constitution, 10 wisdom, and 17 charisma. For the dexterity, this is here mainly for a little bit of more armor class and initiative. 16 constitution, so we're not very squishy and we can somewhat succeed in our concentration saving throws, although we will not be concentrating on any important spells. Wisdom 10, this is so just that we don't have a negative in wisdom saving throws. And then finally, charisma 17, of course, our main spellcasting modifier, which we want to get as high as possible. Then for the skill proficiencies, now for my background, I have the Guild Artisan, so I have proficiency in Persuasion and Insight. You can choose any background of your preference. It is completely up to you. Now for the skills that we get to choose here, In my case, out of the good ones, I have investigation, so investigation is quite good here. Arcana is decent. Arcana pops out quite a decent amount, so I would leave Arcana where it is. History, nature, and religion aren't too great. So my primary focus would be investigation, Arcana, and then of course, if you want additional skill, proficient like dialogue skill proficiencies. But since we're a warlock, we'll be basically great at every dialogue situation since we have high charisma. Alright, so level 2, we'll be sticking with our Warlock for one more level. Here we get an additional spell slot, and I'm suggesting you take Protection from Evil and Good here. Reason is, this is a great spell as a defensive type of spell that you can use against aberrations, celestials, elementals, fae, fiends, and undead. These creatures can't charm, frighten, or possess you, and they have disadvantage on attack rolls against you. So if you need this, this is great when you do need it, and I think compared to the everything else here, it is probably the most useful as you can use it when you need it, you don't need to worry about it afterwards. For the Eldritch invocations, we have to take, of course, the Agonizing Blast. What this does is, when you cast Eldritch Blast, add your Charisma modifier to its damage dealt, unless it is negative. So, basically, in this case, we'll be getting plus 3 damage to every single Eldritch Blast, and this also goes to every single beam, so at later levels, it will apply plus 3 to every beam, so every beam will deal minimum 4 damage, so minimum damage we can deal if all 4 beams hit is 4, 8, and then 12. For the second Eldritch Evocation, I would suggest Devil's Sight. Devil's Sight is great because it does give you basically dark vision, but it's an upgraded version which increases its range to 80 feet, and also you can see it through both normal and magical darkness. So this works through the darkness spell as well, and we will not be replacing any spells. And at level 3, we're gonna go to our sorcerer. So we're gonna start our multi-class. Then first for our subclass, we're gonna take the Draconic Bloodline. This gives us a built-in mage armor, so we don't need to have it equipped, which is quite nice since we get to save a spell slot in a nutshell. It also gives us hit points, so Draconic Resilience. Your maximum hit point increases by 1 for each sorcerer level. So in a nutshell, we'll have a total of 10 additional hit points. Then for the cantrips. So here I would suggest that you take more of utility / other elemental cantrips to keep useful. So light is a great one, since this is useful in Act 2 against those creatures that really hide in the shadows. Shocking Grasp is nice if you are not basically until you reach the point where you can use Eldritch Blast even in close range, where you don't have disadvantage or where the accuracy is low. This is nice because you can shock a target and then run away, since what this does is makes the target lose reactions when you do hit them with this. Then another good one is you could pick up Mage Hand. Mage Hand is nice to spawn it somewhere so you can then put levers and stuff like that where you don't need to go there yourself. And then getting Firebolt is nice for lighting up flaming surfaces. You could even replace the Mage Hand with the Ray of Frost, so you can then also freeze surfaces to make enemies slip. But again, all of these will be very situational, as we'll primarily focus on using Eldritch Blast. So in this case, I'll just go with the Mage Hand. Now for the sorcerer spells, we will be going with Shield. Shield, of course, being one of the best level 1 spells in the game. It's a reaction that adds 5 armor class when you attack, so you can increase your armor by 5, causing enemies to miss, and you also make yourself immune to magic missile damage. Since we are a draconic sorcerer, we don't need mage armor. Instead, I would suggest picking up the magic missile. Magic missile is great. It's force damage. Its minimum damage that it deals is 2, so you can use this to finish off low health enemies without taking a risk of somehow you missing all of your Eldritch Blast for like 2 turns in a row and they surviving and somehow just living with 1 HP left. For the Bloodline, we were okay, we did the subclass. So for the Dragon Ancestor, you could go red fire for the Burning Hands. Acid, I don't think it's worth it. I believe this will give you then acid resistance. Lightning, either cold. We already have armor back at this, so we don't need it. Poison, rare sickness, not really necessary. What I went with was gold, and then this gives me Disguise Self, which is which can come in candy. Sorry about that. The fog is not really useful since we won't be really casting anything other than Eldritch Blast. Same thing with Tasha's Hideous Laughter or Sleep. So I went something that's gonna be there in the background if I need to do it. This came in handy when I was doing the Mirror of Loss, so I just took gold and then fire Dragon Ancestor for the Disguise Self. You can't really go wrong with any of these, but you won't really get much of a boost anyway, so might as well just go with this. And then this is your scales. I just went with no scales. Level 4, we are a sorcerer level 2. We gain an additional spell here. And what I went with, I believe, was the Thunder Wave. Thunder Wave is nice for basically pushing enemies away from you. You could also take something like the Enhanced Leap, so you can cast it on yourself, on your allies, so they can jump further. False Life, you don't need because you have Armor Vagatis, so yeah, we'll just go with the Thunder Wave for pushing enemies away. Now, for Meta Magic. Careful spell I don't really like because it only makes allies take half damage. It doesn't work like Evocation where they take 0 damage. So I don't think it's really worth it. Now we will be taking Twin Spell because what it does, it basically splits the spell and you cast 2 of the same spell. So for example, if you use this with Hold Person, you can then cast it on 2 different targets. So we'll be taking Twin Spell. Distance spell is okay. It increases the range by 50%. Melee range spells get a range of 30 feet. Then extended spell doubles the duration of conditions, summons, and surfaces caused by spells. So I'll be taking this because this is quite nice with the hypnotic pattern and with fear. Those spells we won't be really casting from our spell slots. We'll be mainly casting them from our scrolls, and Meta Magic does work with scrolls. So extend spell is actually quite nice for that. At level 5, we unlock our second level spells. Here we're of course taking the Misty Step. We'll be primarily trying to leave level 2 spell slots for the most part, but if we manage to get our hands on scrolls of Misty Step, then we'll basically turning those into meta magic points. But until we reach that point, Misty Step is a pretty good spell to have here. Now, for the meta magic that we have here, I would suggest taking Recon Spell. This is a staple of this build because this allows you to cast Eldritch Blast as a bonus action for 3 sorcery points. So it is a very good meta magic point to have here. Heightened Spell we'll be getting later. What it does, targets of spells that require saving throws have disadvantage on their first saving throw. So we'll be getting this all the way at level 12. That's when we get an additional meta magic point. This will be a quite nice one, especially when we want to fear or hypnotic pattern or confusion a big clump of enemies. So this is the one that we'll be getting on much later. For the racial spells, we did get here now our darkness. So basically, one free cast of darkness is nice to have, and we can move on. Now, we did not get our feat until just now, but that is fine. It is quite later, so whole 2 levels, but nothing to worry about. Now, for the sorcerer cantrip, I will go for the Ray of Frost this time, so I have this as a utility. For the spells, here I would suggest taking Darkness. Darkness is, again, quite nice with this character, and if we can get Scrolls of Darkness, we'll be getting them. If not, then, well, we can also leave. Since we'll have some spell slots from our Misty Step earlier, we can also cast Darkness with if necessary. Then for our first feat, we'll be going for ability improvement +2 into charisma. Reason we are not going spell sniper immediately is so we have a little bit of higher spell save DC attack roll, so we are a little bit more accurate with our spells. Then at level 5 or 4, you could have dealt with Auntie Ethel, and there you can get +1 into any additional ability score. There I would suggest taking +1 into charisma, so we would have a nice 20, so we have even more damage, accuracy, and spell save DC. At level 7, we unlock our 3rd level spells, and here I would suggest taking either Slow or Fear. This will be another 2, or even a hypnotic pattern. These 3 will be the spell scrolls we'll be also looking for to get, because those are quite powerful. For this example, I will take Fear right now. Then at level 8, we unlock a elemental affinity damage and resistance. So when you cast a spell that deals damage of the type associated with the draconic ancestor, you add your charisma modifier to the damage. And then we also get resistance. When you cast a spell that causes damage of the type associated with the draconic ancestor, you can spend a skill point to gain resistance to that damage type. So this is going to be useless since we already have damage resistance to fire, but this can be nice with our reaction, especially with the Asmodeus Tiefling, since we get Hellish Rebuke once per long rest as a reaction. So this will increase its damage also. So that's quite decent. Then for the additional spell here, I will be taking Hypnotic Pattern. Could even take Slow. Either one of those is quite fine. You can also take Hold Person, but we don't really need that. At level 9, we unlock our 4th level spell slots. So here I would suggest going for Confusion. Confusion is going to be one of the spells that you will cast on a big group of enemies, and again, with the extended spell, it can last for 4 turns, or it will last more than 3 turns, so it is quite nice with that. And again, it'll be one of those spells to look for with spell scrolls. Then for the additional spell here, you could take Dimension Door. Dimension Door is nice to have, but in Act 3, and at this point we will already be in Act 3, or close to getting to Act 3, in the Sorcerer Sundries, they sell a boatload of Dimension Doors, so to be honest, you can just get a large amount of spell scrolls of Dimension Door, and it's not really necessary here. So I'll be taking Slow instead. And then for our second and last feat, we'll be taking Spell Sniper. You learn a cantrip, the number you need to roll a critical hit while with a spell is reduced by 1, this effect can stack. So basically our Eldritch Blast now crit on a 19 instead of a 20. And then change spell, you can take any one of these, doesn't really matter. I'll just take Bone Chill since it's longer range and Thorn Grip is only 30 feet. At level 11, we unlock our 5th level spell, so yes, we will not be getting 6th level spells, but that is fine. At level 11, I would suggest highly pick up the Hold Monster. You will be leaving, or I was leaving pretty much always the 2 spell or 1 spell slot of level 5 so I can recast my Armor or Vagathis at highest level. Also, being able to cast Hold Monster is very powerful since this works on a lot more creatures compared to Hold Person, and it is a very useful and powerful spell to have throughout the entirety of the late game. Then at level 12, we unlock an additional Sorcerer cantrip. Here, I just took as a splash. You can go with really any of these, doesn't really matter. And then for the last spell, I would suggest taking Dominate Person. You can use this to dominate an enemy so they can fight for you. Although odds are they'll probably not be fighting for you for too long because you'll probably kill their allies very quickly. But it's still okay to have, especially for the last stretch of the game. And our last meta magic point will be taken into Heightened Spell. Like mentioned before, this gives enemies disadvantage on their first saving throw against a spell that we cast. Alright, I did forget to transition to the equipment section, but here we are anyway. So for our headgear, here we have the Hood of the Weave. You gain +2 to spell save DC and attack rolls. This is, I think, probably the best headpiece you can wear. Now, a lot of people will probably want to go with Birthright, but in my case, I don't really need it since I already have 22 Charisma. We went to the Mirror of Loss and got the +2. Until you do that, you could wear Birthright, but if you transfer, or I guess recalculate, the +2 Charisma, it equivalates to +1 to spell save DC and attack rolls. So Hood of the Weave is still better, because it would equivalent to basically having a +4, since every 2 points gives you a +1, right? If my math is not wrong, but you can wear either one of these two interchangeably. I just thought that the Hood of the Weave would be much more powerful here, and it looks much better with our outfit. Now, for the earlier game alternatives, you could use the Shade Spell Circlet. While the wearer is obscured by shadow, their spells gain +1 bonus to their spell save DC, making them more likely to succeed. Or you could take the Fistbreaker Helmet, which gives you +1 bonus to spell save DC, regardless of if you're obscured or not, and it gives you +1 to initiative. So this would be an upgrade to the Spade Shield Circlet, and you do get it later, so you can transition from one to the other, and then to the Birthright, and then lastly to the Hood of the Weave. Then for our cloak, I went with the Cloak of the Weave. This gives you a +1 bonus to spell save DC and attack rolls. It also allows you to absorb elements, but I didn't really catch myself using this all too much. So you mainly want it for spell save DC and attack rolls bonus. For the alternatives, you could use Cloak of Protection. Since we do have relatively low armor class, you could use Cloak of Protection instead, so you get armor class to 18. Or you can use also the Cloak of Displacement. At the beginning of your turn, Cloak activates, granting enemies disadvantage on attack rolls against the wearer, so this is basically the effect of the Blur spell. For the armor, I went with the Potent Robe, of course. You can cantrips deal additional damage equal to your charisma modifier, so now our modifier bonus for Eldritch Blast is doubled. So instead of a +6, we now deal a +12 bonus damage with each Eldritch Blast beam, which is quite ridiculous. Then the other effect is the Well-Liked and Well-Fortified. At the beginning of the wearer's turn, the robe activates, granting them temporary hit points equal to their charisma modifier, and also armor class +1. Now for the alternatives, I do not have it here, but the Infernal Robe is great. To get that thing, you do need to kill Karlach. It basically gives you +1 to armor class, resistance to fire. It gives you also a bonus action, Fire Shield Worm. It is probably the best robe you can get in Act 1, and it will basically serve you until you get the potent robe in Act 2. Otherwise, what you can also go for is take the Protective Sparks Wall. You gain +1 bonus to spell save DC, and when the wearer has lightning charges, you gain +1 to armor class and saving throws. This can work with one of our weapons that we'll get into in a moment. Then for the gloves, we're going with the Spellbind gloves. When you cast a spell that requires an attack roll, you can take a -5 penalty to the roll and deal additional 1d8 damage. This will be basically turned on pretty much non-stop once we get the risky ring, but for those enemies that have ridiculously high armor class, we will of course can't just turn it off. But getting an additional 1d8 bonus damage to every beam of the Eldritch Blast is also quite ridiculous, so there's that. For the alternatives, you can take the Bracers of Defense. You gain +2 bonus to armor class as long as you're not wearing armor or holding a shield. So this is nice for the early game for extra armor. The Sparkle Hands. When I hit with the unarmed strike, they were against 2 lightning charges. This doesn't matter since we are not really striking with our hands. But the second effect is quite nice. While imbued with the lightning charges, attacks against metal constructs and foes wearing metal armor gain advantage. And we can use this as a sorcerer since this is not considered as armor, it's just gloves. And then lastly, we have the Daredevil gloves. You gain +1 bonus to spell attack rolls, which is quite useful. It also allows you to cast your spells such as Eldritch Blast in melee range, so Daredevil proximity. Your ranged spell attacks are made as melee spell attacks when you are adjacent to a hostile creature. This effect can be toggled off, so useful until you get your Spellbind gloves. For the boots, I went with the Boots of Speed. This gives us click heals, which is a bonus action dash. You can use this basically once per turn, and I prefer this over the Boots of Stormy Climber. Even though Stormy Climber boots will synergize with our amulet, I prefer Boots of Speed because these give you a really good maneuverability capability compared to just getting 2 extra turns of reverberation with every Eldritch Blast hit. And I think it doesn't even over apply reverberation, so generally I think Boots of Speed are just much better here. For our amulets, as mentioned before, here is the Spine Shatter Amulet. When the wearer deals damage with a ranged spell attack, it inflicts 2 reverberation upon the target. So if all 3 of our beams hit, we get 6 and it immediately procs the reverberation. When the entity has far more reverberation, it takes 1d4 thunder damage, possibly falls prone. Reverberation per stack gives the character a penalty to strength, dexterity, and constitution saving throw, so it's a quite decent effect. For the alternatives, or actually not the alternatives, but the amulets you would carry in your backpack is the Pearl of Power Amulet and the Spellcrux Amulet. These are mainly here to restore one of our sorcerer spell slots. So this one we can restore level 1 to 3, and this one can restore level 1 to 6. So since we don't have a level 6 spell, we can just restore our 5th level slots with this. Now for the rings, we're of course going with the Risky Ring. You have advantage on attack rolls and receive a disadvantage on saving throws. Now, this is a great ring for this character. The disadvantage on saving throws is quite a penalty, but I think it is worth it considering that you can then have this turned on for the most part and you'll be dealing ridiculously high amounts of damage to the point where, well, you'll pretty easily be able to kill 1 to 2 enemies every turn. And then for the second ring, we have the Ring of Protection, armor class saving throws +1. I think this is quite important here since we do have relatively low armor. I think Ring of Protection is quite necessary here. I didn't have any alternatives for that, but if you have any other preferences, you can of course take them. Now for our weapons, we're going with, of course, the Knife of the Undermountain King. This gives us essentially improved kill, so reduces your number you need to roll for a kill hit by 1. This effect can stack, and when you roll 2 damage or less, roll the dice taking the highest result. So this effect won't really matter to us since we won't be using the dagger to attack. We just want it for the improved critical hit chance or critical hit rate. Same thing with Shadow Blade. You have advantage on attack rolls against slightly obscure targets when using this blade. Again, won't really matter too much for us. For the second weapon, I have the Rhapsody here. Gain a +1 bonus to attack rolls and damage and spell save DC for every foe you slay up to a maximum of 3, and possibly inflicts bleeding when hitting a creature when this weapon while hiding or invisible. The second effect won't matter, but the first effect is very nice since we'll be quite reliably killing a lot of enemies every turn, or 1 to 2 enemies. It will be really easily be able to stack to the maximum +3s, and this dagger is quite nice to boost our spell scroll spellcasting. So this is the dagger that you would probably want to and also it gives you a special effects where when you have maximum stacks, you can choose to either A, deal guaranteed critical chance, or I believe attack with advantage. It has 2 really nice effects that actually don't really show here when you have the +3. Then for the alternatives, so in the early game, you can actually use the spell Sparkler. What it does is when the wielder deals damage with the spell or a cantrip, they gain 2 lightning charges. And since, of course, Eldritch Blast is a cantrip, combination of the staff, the protective sparks wall, and the bracers or the gloves can give you quite nice benefits. This essentially increases your damage with 1 lightning charge up, or when you have 5 charges, 1d8 lightning damage. And then this can give you advantage against metal enemies, and then this gets boosted with armor class and semi-throw. So this is a quite nice early game combination. But then for the late game, for your offhand weapon, you could take Bloodthirst. This additionally gives you an improved critical, so now you crit on even less. So let's take our whole critical thing in combination. We would crit with our spell Sniper on a 19, with this on an 18, with if we have this on a 17, and then with our range up on a 16. But I don't think it is actually necessary, since we're shooting so many Eldritch Blast every turn that through the volume of, or to the amount of the Eldritch Blasts, I don't think it's really necessary to have really low crit chance. So I would value this not really important to get. Instead, Glim Dance Dagger is also quite nice here. When it's in your offhand, it gives you additional bonus to your armor class. So we can, if you want, you can have 18 armor class, and you can just turn off this light if you don't want the light. But Rhapsody is here if you want additional spell save DC. And then lastly, for our ranged weapon, we have the Dead Shot, of course. Improved critical hit, so number to roll is reduced by 1. This effect gets stacked, and then doubles proficiency when rolling range attacks with this weapon. Doesn't really matter, again, we want it for the improved critical hit. Alright, so that is it for the equipment section. Actually, that is not it for the equipment section, because I should mention that the elixirs you would want to go for, of course, you can go for the Elixir of Richness, which reduces the roll you need for a critical hit. The Elixir of Bloodlust is quite nice because this will allow you to cast an additional Eldritch Blast per turn when you kill something. And then Elixir of Vigilance is nice to pick up before combat, and then you drink it afterwards and replace it with something else. Also, getting a bunch of these elixirs of arcane cultivation is very powerful in, for example, the last stretch or before big fights, because if you drink, let's say, the level 1/1, you then convert the level 1 spell into meta magic. Then you drink a level 2/1, convert the level 2 into the sorcery points, and then if you drink the level 1/1 again, it will work, and you can just infinitely just swap between them to get like a boatload of sorcery points. So there's also that, why these are very nice to have as a sort of boost to your increase of sorcery points. And of course, then for the spells, like I mentioned, you want to get a bunch of these spell scrolls to have as to boost them with your meta mage, since if we activate, for example, the heightened spell, as you can see, these light up, so we can actually cast these when enemies, this will give enemies disadvantage. Or if we cast, for example, Twin Spell, we can cast Phantasmal Killer on 2 targets. Or if we take Extended Spell, we can increase the Spell Confusion to 6 turns, Fear to 4 turns, and then Hybrid Pattern to 4 turns. So it is a quite nice things to have here with the spell scrolls. All right, but now that is it for the equipment section. I will now see you in the combat showcase. Alright, so here we are, the Flaming Fists barracks for Eternal Battle Showcase. Before combat started, the drink an Elixir of Vigilance so we get higher initiative and hopefully start first. I also converted a bunch of my spell slots into sorcery points for our meta magic. So let's take a look at the accuracy with our Agonizing Blast. So on a armor class 16, we have 94% chance to hit. 18 armor class is 88, which is still quite good. I think anything over 80% is okay to go for. But if it can be higher, of course, that's better. And then armor class 14, well, yeah, it's almost guaranteed 98% chance. So let's take a look what kind of damage we can do. Hopefully we don't miss everything. All right, I think we got just 1 crit. Yes, so 1 crit. So since the damage dice that do get doubled with a crit is the actual, the first damage there, the 1d10, and then the spell might one. So from those we dealt 27 damage, then it was plus our Agonizing Blast, and then plus our Gregarious Casting. So the damage is quite high, especially if we manage to crit all of them, you would basically one-shot most of enemies. So this guy got left with 1 HP, which is quite unfortunate. But if we had, well, normally in a normal battle situation, I would just have Elixir of Bloodlust going. So then when we use our Meta Magic Quicken spell, so we can cast Eldritch Blast as a bonus action. Hopefully this beam doesn't miss, and we get a kill on this guy. We then get a second action so we can keep on blasting. So then we would cast Eldritch Blast again, finish this guy off, and then we can move on to other targets. But as you can see, these guys both got frightened because of our subclass from the Warlock, the Great Old One. And there, of course, he takes Reverberation since 2 of the beams hit, so he got 4 stacks of that as well. But yeah, the build itself is generally straightforward. What also makes bosses kind of obsolete is Scarlet Remittance. Since on the way to the bosses you always fight something, it's really easy to stack up the +3 for the dagger. Now, I thought it would work with summons, but it does not, so you actually do have to kill hostile creatures. But once you get a +3, and then in combination with Heightened Spell, anything that you can cast Hold Person on, especially the bosses, it's kind of makes it really easy, even with if they have the legendary resistance. But then again, you can burn through legendary resistance quite easily with heightened spell as well, or quicken spell. But yeah, generally straightforward build. Just start blasting. If it's something that needs crowd control, get heightened spell or extended spell or even twin spell and just crowd control the crap out of them, and that is about it. So I hope you enjoyed. I would appreciate if you leave a like and subscribe for more Baldur's Gate 3 content, and I'll see you in the next one.